Okay. Hi guys, this is Georgie here today, and today is the day in which I film a second book chat. Yay! Today I want to talk to you about the Underground Railroad, written by Colson Whitehead. Probably it's head. So yeah, today we're gonna talk about the Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. This has been the only book I have read in May, and I have put off talking about it for so long as I did not have enough time to put together all my ideas and then film a video. Hence, I'm filming the video just right after the middle of June. Good job. I think, however, that the interlude has actually helped me think and has allowed me to structure my thoughts and understand the book better. More often than not, we tend to read books really fast, especially these bestseller books of the year or something like that. And I think more often than not, we tend to overlook certain aspects of the book or not understand certain references or other stuff, which is why I think reading just a book in the month of May was really helpful for me. Let's kick this video off with a disclaimer. As some of you may know, the Underground Railroad is on the topic of race. And as you also know, race is a very sensitive topic for many people. I, however, want to approach the subject as I'm curious and I have absolutely zero bones to share with either the oppressors or the oppressed. I am, as you know, from Romania, and I am nothing but an enthusiast of history. Unfortunately, history is not always a beautiful thing and is filled with tragedy, cruelty, violence, and I think everybody should talk about this book precisely to make that aspect of history known. Sometimes history is just the story of those who win wars, those who win supremacy, and more often than not, this dark aspect is put in a sort of shadow, and people tend to overlook the darkness and tend to look just at the bright side. I do not pretend to be an expert in the subject. I myself am really learning about it, and the more I learn, the more horrified I am, unfortunately. However, I think it is important to talk about this aspect because it is important to see both sides of a story. This will probably tie well with something that I will say by the end of the video. So stay tuned to the end. Probably this part will make more sense to you. Now, what is the Underground Railroad? Well, this book tells the story of a subversive organization that helped people of African descent find their freedom. Also, the Underground Railroad is the story of Cora, one of those people who went chasing after their freedom. This organization used to operate in the South States, and when I say South States, I mean the plantation states, which relied back in the day heavily on the workforce which was brought in from Africa, mainly Africa. Unfortunately, the relationship between the American colonists and the African people was that of master and slave. The slaves did not have any right, they were not paid for their work, and they were tied to their owner until the owner decided to sell them. Basically, a slave was like a piece of property. The slaves used to live separately from the white folk, and they used to work from dawn till dusk. They would also have to stay on the same plantation until the owner decided to sell them, and were not allowed to leave under any condition. If they were to leave, they would be caught by slave catchers who would retrieve them to their owner and would get paid for having captured the slave or slaves that tried to escape. This was also used as a sort of example to the slaves that lived on the plantation, meaning that disobedience could potentially end in torture and death. Given the fact that this system was imposed by force, and relied heavily on brutality and violence. Many people tried to escape. This is where the Underground Railroad comes into place. Now, about Cora. Cora is the daughter of Mabel, who is one of the slaves that managed to escape plantation life successfully. Cora harbors a lot of resentment towards her mother. She blames her for having left her behind to plantation life. Cora manages to get the hang of plantation life all by herself and is very strong willed, and she's really smart and doesn't let anyone cross her, not even the white folk, which earns her the reputation of an outcast. One day she is approached by Caesar, who is also a slave on the plantation. He suggests her to flee the plantation and look for a new life in the Free State. She decides to escape with Caesar one summer night. After a while, they managed to reach their contact, an operator for the Underground Railroad, and they managed to enter underground and catch a train towards an unknown destination. Now, I could tell you what happens every step of the way, but I think that it would kill all the fun of the book. However, I want to highlight certain aspects of what happens next. So a discussion afterwards would make more sense. They first get to South Carolina, and when they get there, it looks like paradise on earth. African people are treated justly, they have the right to healthcare, they get jobs working for white people, they even get to earn their own living. The two escapees are really happy to see that there's actually the possibility of having a good life there together. They even think they shouldn't run anymore. However, at some point, Cora finds out that this generosity that comes from the government and the healthcare system is nothing but a facade for a huge clinical trial the white hospitals are conducting. Basically, she finds out that the white people use African men and women, and they use them in different ways. They would suggest African women upon arrival to use a sort of contraceptive method that would suppress their capacity to have children in order to keep the African population under control and ultimately suppress their numbers. They would use men in a different way, watch how syphilis is spreading. They would use the brothels in order to help syphilis spread. Then they would observe all the men that caught syphilis, and they would try to see how the illness evolves in order to find a cure, but not a cure for the African man, but a cure for the white folk who might by mistake catch syphilis as well when, I don't know, hanging out in a brothel, for example. When she finds out everything, she wants to escape. However, Caesar is captured by Ridgway, a slave catcher that will appear several times as the story goes along. Another train takes her to North Carolina, where the situation is a little bit different. North Carolina has declared that they abolished slavery. However, they still treat African slaves badly, especially those that are caught on the country's territory. She gets at an out of work station where she is found by Martin, a former operator of the Underground Railroad. Since it's so dangerous to harbor African slaves, he decided to get out of the Underground Railroad as it was too risky for him and his family. Harboring an African slave is an offense punishable by death. However, I think he took pity on Cora, which is why he took her home and sheltered her in their attic, where she gets to witness the show the townsmen would put up every Sunday. During those shows, they would put up a sort of theatrical plays with a clear message, and as the show continued, things would take a turn towards some moral stories about slavery, about why it is not okay to harbor African slaves. Ultimately, the show would end with slave which would be hanged in public, or slaves, it depends. After being tipped off by the couple's Irish maid, Ridgway raids the house while Cora was sleeping. At that point, Ridgway manages to capture Cora. At that point of the book, we actually learn what slave catching really is. It's basically bounty hunting for slave owners. Upon their return to Georgia, they take a detour to Tennessee to go and return another slave to his owner. In Tennessee, they run into a band of freemen which rescues Cora and injures Ridgway. The freemen take her to a farm which is known as the Valentine Farm. Valentine is of mixed race and has a farm on which freedmen and runaways get to live together happily. I guess that's where she finally finds some resemblance of peace. She even falls in love with the guy that saved her, whose name is Royal. And however, at some point the freedmen tip off the slave catchers again, as they are fearful of what the runaways would do to their well-being. At that point, Valentine's farm is set on fire, and many of the freed men are killed, including Royal. Ridgway manages to capture Cora again, and while they descend into an underground railroad, she manages to escape again. However, I'm not gonna say how, as I'm gonna kill a really juicy a part of the story. Basically, the book ends with Cora running towards freedom again. Now I think we should talk about the things that I have loved about this. Thing number one is its simplicity. I think at first glance this book is deceptively simple, both in terms of wording and in terms of plot. The story is fairly straightforward, and I think after about 100 pages, I actually thought I was reading a young adult novel. However, I think that the author uses this cloak of simplicity to work on his characters. For example, Cora, although she is young and inexperienced, is very smart, strong-willed, and perceptive. I enjoyed that she really doesn't wanna make you empathize with her condition as a slave. She herself sees her condition as a given, a thing she was born in. However, she is a slave unlike any other. She is atypical in the sense that she is among the only people on the plantation that wants to be free and that wants to live life on her own terms. She's admirable because of that. I guess the wording is very simple because this is the story told from the point of view of a character that is young, unexperienced, and probably easily impressionable. I already mentioned Cora, but there are others that should be mentioned as they are really important to the story. Ridgway, for example, illustrates just how hypocritical the white people were. It is the best example to illustrate just how much effort was put into creating a story that would entitle the whites to own the black people. I was actually disgusted when I read about how the colonists built a whole story in which they were seen as the saviors of the African population. Saviors in the sense that they saved the blacks from a life of sin and from the darkness of ignorance. I was also disgusted to see how such a fantastical story was reason enough for them to think that chaining people against their will and treating them like cattle was absolutely alright. Also, I was disgusted about that passage with South Carolina in which white doctors treated the black people as some sort of lab rats on which they could do anything. It was as if they thought they would have control over their whole life, or at least they thought they had control over their whole life. I think it is almost dehumanizing to actually pretend that you can control someone's life. Who that person is gonna marry, how many kids they're gonna have, if they're gonna have kids or not. if they are able to move from one place to another or not, if they are forced to get just one job and not have any other job ever. I think it really shows the really ugly face of the white people. Also, the people from North Carolina, how they used the pain of other people as entertainment, and how they not only strip the slaves of their freedom, but also strip them of their dignity, which took the whole oppression a step further, let's say. Also, I liked just how there was a sort of gradient when it comes to both the positive aspect and the negative aspect of the white folk. I think what was really interesting in this book was the fact that some of the operators for the Underground Railroad were actually white, and how there were, in fact, sympathizers of the racial cause, even among the white folk. However, not every white man had the courage to actually face his conviction. Now, in terms of style, this author did a splendid job, and that is the way in which he juggles between periods of calmness and periods of conflict, and how he makes the transition between the two. I really like the fact that he really builds tension gradually, and then as a reader you sort of know that there's something bad that is going to happen, and you sort of fear that that moment is going to come sooner than you think, and then bam, suddenly it's happening, and you're right in the middle of conflict, and you just cannot believe that things are picking up so fast. I think that is a really good imitation of how things really happen in real life. You think everything is going great, and then something bad happens all of a sudden. I like to call this thing being literarily ambushed. Uh, I also enjoyed how throughout the book he really plays with long and short sentences, which gives a sort of rhythm to the story. When it was slow, the writing was, the sentences were so long that it was as if you could hear the footsteps of someone going down the stairs into an underground railroad station, or you could hear the main character's heartbeat when she was hiding from Ridgeway, and you could actually feel what they were feeling in a way that was truly realistic and beautiful, and that really helped the reading experience, because at some point you would feel warm and fuzzy, while a second later your blood would freeze in your veins. Basically, Cora herself is actually an observer. You get to see her observations without having to witness any philosophizing about what you're seeing, what it means, how it could be changed. And here I'm talking not only about the actual events that happen, but also about the bigger picture, like the condition of the slave. How can we change it? How can we make things better? Let's say. And I think that's a good aspect of the book, because it emphasizes a very important point, the fact that sometimes life is unfair. However, although life may be unfair sometimes, you can always find a solution, and you can always jump back on your feet from whatever adversity you may be faced with. The story itself, because of this language of a person that is developing, is not sugar-coated, and it's not exaggerated. And I think that even this simple language is more effective than a language that is filled with complicated terms. It's more effective to have a book about race that is written in a simple language, because it helps you read about something and then make your own opinion about things. I myself was a bit conflicted about picking up a book on the topic of race, because I see that people are very riled up about the topic. I did not want to read something in which one side is seen as better than the other. I really think that giving one side or the other a medal is quite pointless, because at the end of the day, what the book teaches us is the fact that regardless of our skin color, we can make mistakes. We It doesn't mean that only the white folk or the black folk is good or bad. Every single category, every single people has its good people, its bad people, its neutral people, just like you could see in the book. I think that this aspect is often left out when we talk about race nowadays. Spectrums are great. It's great to see a bit of everything in every race, in every nationality, in everything. That's what educates your sense of diversity and makes you be more accepting of other people. That's where the subversiveness of the book lies, because it lets you make an opinion. It doesn't impose an opinion on you. It doesn't force you to think things in a certain way or accept just the opinion of, I don't know, your entourage, for example, or of what you see on TV, etc., etc. I was in fact glad after reading it to see that it actually won the Pulitzer Prize for 2017, and I actually hope that someday it gets to be studied in school, because it is a book that it's meant to be debated, it's meant to be talked about, so people remember that sometimes it's important to not only have history but also his story or his stories in order to better understand a period of time, or to better understand the mentality of a certain epoch, and the spirit of the people, of a people. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this book chat, although I changed the setting about 15 times, and it wasn't a really stable setting. Also, I hope that in the future I will be able to film other book chats, and I hope that you you will watch that as well. If you have liked this book chats, please hit the like button. If you enjoy me blabbing about books, do hit the subscribe button. Also, if you have read the book and you have some thoughts, please leave them in the comments below. And I hope to see you again sometime soon. Thank you so much.